Greetings, YouTube. This is Fragments of Memory, aka the Armchair Philosopher. And I'd like to respond to GManLiveForEvaOnIt, his vid, where he poses the question, why is it okay for women to live at home with their mothers and not okay for males? Now, in the year 1999, the R&B hip-hop group known as TLC came out with the hit song No Scrubs. Within this song, TLC spoke of men who were unemployed, having no car and walking and living at home with mama. These men were the definition of what a scrub was. The trio then went on to say that a scrub could get no love from them. Now this song would serve as an anthem for the poor burdened woman who had to deal with this undesirable man who brought nothing to the table. He was unproductive. He was not doing the things that a man should do, and I put the should do in quotes. Now the song, though cathartic and a hit for TLC, it also reflected a double standard when it came to the way a man is perceived in our society as opposed to the way a woman is perceived. Now, I spoke a little bit about this in my vid, Support Systems, how there's always someone to take care of a woman, but a man must ultimately cut his own path. Now, with the advent of the women's movement, you've had women getting into business, getting into education, getting degrees, and attempting to make a better life for themselves and any offspring. Now, even though this has happened, even though women sing songs such as Beyonce's Who Runs the World, Girls, or I'm an Independent Woman on various other female pop stars and singers and hip hop artists, I'm this independent, strong woman. Well, even with that perspective, there's still the desire for the man who has himself, quote unquote, together. I.e., he's got a degree, he's got a good job, he must be God-fearing, and he must be good looking, and he must also have great sexual prowess, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, in America in general, whether we're speaking of the black community or whether we're speaking of the general community at large, there tends to be more single parenthood. Many fathers are abandoning their posts and dropping the ball. And of course, these mothers have sons. And as much as I think mothers are wonderful things, I think mothers are a wonderful thing. My own mother, I think she's a wonderful woman. A woman cannot teach a man to be a man. That in the final analysis, a woman cannot teach a man to be a man. So, we're dealing with, and I may have mentioned this in another video, but I go back to the movie Fight Club. And I've only read the book, but I heard about this line in the movie where Tyler Durham says to the main character, played by Edward Norton, and Tyler Durham is played by Brad Pitt. He says, we're a nation of men raised by women. And it does seem that, even in my own personal life, I was around more females than I was men. Like, my father and I don't have the greatest of relationships. So, and I didn't have any brothers. I have a younger sister who's 10 months younger than me. And generally speaking, when my mother went out to run an errand or go somewhere, she would take me and my sister along. So I was up under women. And when we would go to a friend of hers house or a friend of the family or a family member's house, they always seemed to have a daughter around, but never a son. So I was always the only guy in the equation. So for the most part, I've been around a lot of women in my life. And I really didn't have that guidepost in my own personal life. And I think even with the independent woman beliefs, even with that, the woman still expects the man to, quote unquote, be a man. And of course, a lot of men don't know what that is exactly. GManForEvaOnIt, he got into things like economic times being hard. And yes, economic times are hard, and especially for black men, we tend to be more affected by it. There are more of us unemployed than the black woman, and then many times, some of us are unemployed and some of us are underemployed. A lot of us might not be working the office job where you get paid maybe $40,000 a year. You make a job where you might only get $3,000 a year, or you might get a job where you make a small amount of money where you can't really live by yourself. So you end up having to either stay at home, pick up a roommate, or go to one of those cheap motels where you pay a monthly stipend, or be homeless. Um, and even, and on the flip side, there are those women, in spite of the women who are working hard and trying to make a life for themselves and their offspring, you've got some women, G-Man covered it a little bit, who are waiting for a sponsor or a captain. And you know what captain we're talking about, and I do too. And just, I look at the expectation of men in our society, even with the hardships and the lack of education and the statistics working against us, we're still expected to be on the come up and pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and still do what we got to do. Where a woman, even now that women are doing things for themselves and quote unquote being independent, she can be at home with her mom. Maybe it is for a reason like, my mother's elderly and she needs someone to take care of her. And maybe there's no such idea of a woman being a failure to launch. And in many respects, the black man is at a disadvantage in this regard. Even though there's still the expectation of the man to be vigorous, to be the breadwinner, and even woo her with his wealth. I like that line in that thing. I had to write that down and just expound on that. And I know from a nature perspective, the natural thing is that the man by nature, males by nature go out and handle the business, and then the woman is to nurture and create the home, and of course the man should be the provider. Well, that might work in certain societies, but I think the way our society is set up here in the United States, here in the Western world, it ain't going down like that. And too often I think we as black men have been left behind. This is not a cry of victimhood as in poor me, but I am saying that we may have some more, we have a bigger hill and a bigger mountain to climb than, let's say, a white person, a white male or a white female, or even a black female. Yes, two incomes are better than one, and I think both do need to bring something to the table. But even then, a man is still expected, first and foremost, to bring something to the table. Now, this in and of itself is not a complaint. I think we as men should be more productive citizens. I think we should try to better ourselves and ultimately better the communities around us, the communities that we stay in. But usually, and I know the self-help guru Ian Levanzan spoke about this, like, what is manhood? In fact, she wrote a whole book called The Spirit of a Man, which is a really good read. And the thing is that a man is expected to have the house, the car, the money, the job. And even though reality says this, the perspective is still from that age-old dichotomy, from maybe the 1950s model of the nuclear family. And you have the perspective and the expectation that is here, but the reality is here. And we're angry at the reality because it doesn't fit to the perception or the expectation. Now, personally, I believe that everyone goes through their periods, everyone goes through hard times, and maybe you have to stay home with your parents or whatever the case might be. For whatever reason, whether it's divorce, whether it's you did fail to launch when you were supposed to, or you don't have the correct credentials to get the better job, or you might have to work a second job. And that can take a toll on the body too. But I really did enjoy the video because those are some realities that are here, are present. So how do I feel about it? I do think a double standard is there. And I do think that if our society were more conducive to make men be men and women be women, it'd be cool. But we got a lot of social issues we need to sort through and work out. Well, that is my 2 cents, or maybe even my dollar's worth of opinion there. So, G-Man forever. I like your vids. Keep up the good work, man. Take it easy.